Her mother, Mary, had been sick for 3 years. The doctor said she needed special treatment that cost a lot of money. Lucy had left university to care for her and take this job. Some days were hard, but Lucy never complained. The Golden Swan was busy that Thursday evening. People whispered excitedly because Robert Wells was dining there. Robert owned Wells Industries and was the richest man in the country. He rarely came to small towns like Oak Ridge. Lucy's boss, Tom, pulled her aside. "You'll serve Mr. Wells's table. Be perfect, Lucy. He could buy this place 10 times over." Lucy nodded, smoothing down her black uniform. Her heart beat fast as she walked to the corner table where Robert Wells sat alone. He was tall with gray hair at his temples and wore an expensive suit. His face looked stern as he studied the menu. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to hear today's specials?" Lucy asked. With her best smile, Robert looked up briefly. "Just bring me your best red wine and the steak, medium rare." Lucy wrote down his order and hurried away. As she worked, she kept glancing at him. There was something sad about the way he sat alone in the busy restaurant. When Lucy brought his wine, she noticed his wallet on the table. It was open, showing a photo of a woman with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Lucy almost dropped the wine glass. The woman in the photo was her mother, but much younger. "Is everything all right?" Robert asked, noticing her shocked face. Lucy couldn't stop herself. "Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" Robert's face went white. The wine glass fell from his hand, spilling red across the white tablecloth. Everyone in the restaurant turned to look. "What did you say?" he whispered. Lucy pointed to the wallet with a shaking finger. "That woman, that's my mother, Mary Wilson." Robert stared at Lucy as if seeing a ghost. He looked from her face to the photo and back again. Lucy could see his hands trembling. "Mary, is your mother?" he asked in a voice so quiet Lucy had to lean closer. "Yes, sir, she's been sick for years. I work here to pay for her treatment." Robert stood up suddenly, leaving money on the table. "Take me to her, please." Lucy's boss nodded when she looked over, giving permission to leave. Outside, Robert's driver waited with a shiny black car. Lucy gave him her mother's address and they drove in silence through the darkening streets. "How old are you, Lucy?" Robert finally asked. 23, sir." Robert closed his eyes. "And your father?" "I never knew him. Mum said he had to go away before I was born. She never spoke about him much." They arrived at the small cottage where Lucy and her mother lived. The garden was neat but simple. Robert followed Lucy up the path, his tall figure looking out of place in this humble setting. Mary was sitting in her armchair by the window, a blanket over her knees. She looked up when the door opened, her smile fading to shock when she saw who was with her daughter. "Robert," she whispered, her voice catching. "Mary," he said, his voice breaking. "It's been 24 years. Lucy looked between them, understanding slowly dawning. The way they stared at each other told a story she had never known. "Lucy," her mother said softly, "this is Robert Wells. He is your father." The end. A struggling waitress asks the Billionaire CEO, "Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" The room fell silent. Lucy stood frozen, looking from her mother to Robert and back again. Her world had just turned upside down. "I don't understand," Lucy said, her voice small. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I thought it was for the best. Robert's family was powerful. They didn't want him to be with someone like me." Robert moved slowly to Mary's side and knelt beside her chair. He looked older, suddenly his shoulders heavy with regret. "I never knew about Lucy," he said, taking Mary's hand gently. "If I had known—" "Your father said he would ruin my life if I told you," Mary explained. "He said I was after your money. When I found out I was having a baby, I was too scared to reach out." Lucy sat down heavily on the sofa. Her whole life she had wondered about her father. She had made up stories in her head about who he might be. Never once had she imagined he would be Robert Wells, one of the richest men in the country. The photograph, Lucy said. Why do you still carry her picture? Robert pulled out his wallet again and looked at the faded photo. I never stopped loving your mother. When my father sent me away to America, I promised I would come back for her. But when I returned 5 years later, people told me she had moved away. I looked for her, but I couldn't find her. Mary wiped her eyes. We moved to my sister's house in the north. I changed my last name back to my maiden name, Wilson. I was afraid your father would try to take the baby away. Robert looked at Lucy, really seeing her for the first time. You have my eyes, he said softly. Lucy wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her was angry. Angry that her mother had kept this secret. Angry that this rich man had never been there when they struggled to pay bills and buy food. Another part felt a strange hope stirring. I came back to Oak Ridge last year to open a new factory, Robert explained. I never imagined I would find Mary again, or discover I had a daughter. Lucy stood up suddenly. I need some air, she said, and walked outside into the garden. The night was cool and clear. Stars shone brightly above the small cottage. Lucy took deep breaths, trying to make sense of everything. After a few minutes, she heard the door open. Robert stepped out and stood beside her, not too close. I know this is a shock, he said quietly. I'm still in shock myself. We needed you, Lucy said, her voice breaking. Mom worked 2 jobs when I was little. Sometimes we didn't have enough to eat, and now she's so sick, and the doctors say she couldn't finish. Robert looked down. I can't change the past, Lucy, but I can help now. I want to get the best doctors for Mary. I want to make things right if you'll let me. Lucy looked at this stranger who was her father. It's not about your money. I know, he said. It's about the time I missed. The birthdays and school plays and scraped knees. I can never get those back. His voice cracked with emotion. But maybe we can start from here. Inside, they could see Mary watching them through the window, her face anxious. She never stopped loving you either, Lucy said quietly. She kept a box of old letters under her bed. I found them once when I was 12. Robert smiled sadly. I wrote to her every day for a year after I left. I never knew if she got them. Lucy took a deep breath. I'm not saying I forgive you yet, but Mom needs help, and I'd like to know who my father is. Robert nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. Together they walked back into the house, where Mary waited with hope in her tired eyes. It was just the beginning of a long road, but for the first time in 24 years, they were all together. The end. A struggling waitress asks the billionaire CEO, Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet? 2 weeks passed since Lucy discovered Robert was her father. The small cottage had changed. New medical equipment for Mary filled the living room. A nurse named Emily came each day to help. Mary was starting a new treatment that Robert had arranged through his connections. Lucy still worked at the Golden Swan, though Robert had offered her money. She refused to quit. I need to stand on my own feet, she told him firmly. The other waiters whispered when she passed. Everyone in town now knew she was Robert Wells's daughter. One evening after her shift, Lucy found Robert waiting in his car outside the restaurant. Can we talk? He asked, opening the passenger door. They drove to the town park and walked along the quiet paths. The summer air was warm and fireflies blinked in the growing darkness. How is your mother today? Robert asked. Better, Lucy said. The new medicine seems to be working. They sat on a bench overlooking the small lake. Lucy watched a family of ducks swimming in the fading light. A struggling waitress asks the billionaire CEO, Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet? Lucy worked as a waitress at the Golden Swan. It was a fancy restaurant in the small town of Oak Ridge. She had blonde hair tied back and a neat, bun and kind blue eyes that smiled even when she was tired. And she was often tired. Lucy worked 6 days a week to pay for her mother's medicine. I want to tell you what happened, Robert said quietly. You deserve to know the whole story. Lucy nodded, ready to listen at last. I met your mother when I was working in my father's factory here. I was learning the business from the ground up. Mary worked in the office. She was beautiful and kind. Robert smiled at the memory. We fell in love quickly but kept it secret. My father would never have approved. Why? Lucy asked. Because she wasn't rich? Robert nodded sadly. My father believed money should marry money. When he found out about us, he was furious. He threatened to close the factory if I didn't end things with Mary. That would have meant hundreds of people losing their jobs. Lucy stared at the water, taking this in. He sent me to America to run our office there. I thought it would be temporary. I wrote to Mary every day. Robert's voice grew rough with emotion. When I finally stood up to my father and came back, a year later they told me Mary had moved away. No one knew where. She was hiding from your father, Lucy said. She was afraid. I looked for her for years, Robert continued. Eventually I gave up. I married someone my father approved of. It didn't last. We divorced after 10 years. I never had other children. Lucy turned to look at him properly. In the dim light she could see herself in his face, the shape of his eyes, the curve of his jaw. When did you see the picture in your wallet? She asked. The one of Mum? I took it the day before I left for America. I've carried it with me every day since. Lucy felt something shift inside her. Her anger was still there, but softer now. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Robert said, but I want to be part of your life now if you'll let me. And what happens when Mum gets better? Lucy asked. Will you disappear again? Robert shook his head firmly. Never. I've lost 23 years with you both. I won't lose another day. They walked back to the car in comfortable silence. When they reached the cottage, Mary was sitting up in her new hospital bed, looking stronger than she had in months. I've been thinking, she said when they came in, about what happens next. Lucy sat beside her mother and took her hand. What do you mean? If this treatment works, I might get better. Really better. Mary looked at Robert. And then what? We can't keep pretending the past didn't happen. Robert stepped forward. I don't want to pretend. I want us to try again, all of us. Mary's eyes filled with tears. After all this time? Time doesn't change how I feel, Robert said simply. Lucy watched them, these two people who had loved and lost and found each other again. She wasn't ready to call Robert Dad yet. That would take time. But for the first time, she could imagine a future where they were a family. The end. A struggling waitress asks the billionaire CEO, Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet? Autumn. Arrived in Oak Ridge. The trees turned golden and red. 3 months had passed since Lucy discovered Robert was her father. Mary's health improved with each passing week. The new treatment was working better than anyone had hoped. Lucy still found. It's strange to see Robert's car parked outside their cottage. He visited every day, bringing flowers for Mary and books for Lucy. He learned that Lucy loved to read but had given up her English degree to care for her mother. One Tuesday afternoon, Robert invited Lucy to visit his office. She had never been to the Wells Industries building, a tall glass tower in the center of town. I want to show you something, he said as they rode the lift to the top floor. Lucy felt out of place in her simple clothes. People stared as Robert led her through the busy office. They reached a large room with a beautiful view of the town. A woman in a smart suit stood up when they entered. Lucy, this is Helen, my assistant, Robert said. Helen, this is my daughter. It was the first time Robert had called her his daughter to someone else. Lucy felt a strange warmth in her chest. Helen smiled warmly. It's wonderful to meet you. Robert has told me so much about you. Robert showed Lucy around the office, introducing her to everyone they met. Some people looked surprised, others curious. By the end of the tour, Lucy's head was spinning. Why did you bring me here? She asked when they were alone again in his office. Robert sat down and gestured for her to join him. I wanted you to see what I do. But also, I wanted to ask you something. He placed a folder on the desk between them. I'm starting a new project. A foundation to help families with sick members who can't afford treatment. I want you to run it. Lucy stared at him in surprise. Me? But I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know what it's like to struggle, to worry about medical bills and still try to keep going. Robert's eyes were serious. That knowledge is more valuable than any business degree. Lucy opened the folder. Inside were plans for a building, budget sheets, and a mission statement. At the top of the first page was a name, the Mary Wilson Foundation. You named it after Mum, Lucy whispered. Robert nodded. It seemed right. Lucy thought about all the nights she had lain awake worrying about money. All the families like hers who didn't have a billionaire father to step in and help. I would need to learn a lot, she said slowly. I'll help you, Robert promised. We can learn together. That evening, Lucy told Mary about Robert's offer. They sat in the garden, watching the sunset. Mary looked healthier than she had in years, with color in her cheeks and strength returning to her voice. What do you think? Lucy asked. Mary took her daughter's hand. I think you would be wonderful at it. You've always wanted to help people. I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive him completely, Lucy admitted. For not being there all those years? Forgiveness takes time, Mary said wisely. But working together might be a good start. Lucy thought about the families the foundation could help. She thought about using her experience for something good. There's something else, Mary said, her voice gentle. Robert asked me to dinner tomorrow night, just the two of us. Lucy looked at her mother in surprise. Like a date? Mary blushed slightly. I suppose so. How do you feel about that? Lucy asked. Mary looked up at the evening star appearing in the darkening sky. 24 years is a long time, but some feelings never change. Lucy squeezed her mother's hand. Their little family was changing in ways she never could have imagined. It was scary, but also exciting. The end. A struggling waitress asks the billionaire CEO, Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet? 1 year had passed since that fateful evening at the Golden Swan. Spring flowers bloomed in the garden of the cottage where Lucy had grown up. But today, the cottage stood empty. Mary and Lucy had moved to a new house on the edge of town. It was not as big as Robert's mansion, but it was bright and spacious with a beautiful garden where Mary could tend to her flowers as her strength returned. The Mary Wilson Foundation was now 6 months old. Lucy sat in her office looking over applications from families needing help. The foundation had already assisted 20 families with medical costs, housing, and support. Lucy felt proud of what they had built. There was a knock at her door. Tom, her old boss from the Golden Swan, stood there with a smile. The food for the party just arrived, he said. Everything looks perfect. Lucy thanked him. Tom now worked as the foundation's events manager. He had a talent for bringing people together. Today was special. It was Mary's birthday, and they were having a garden party to celebrate. It was also the day Robert planned to make an important announcement. Lucy walked through the foundation building. The walls were covered with photos of the families they had helped. At the entrance hung a large portrait of Mary from 25 years ago, the same image Robert had carried in his wallet all those years. Outside in the garden, tables were set up with white cloths and spring flowers. Mary was there, looking healthy and happy as she arranged name cards. When she saw Lucy, she waved. Is everything ready? Lucy asked, hugging her mother. Almost, Mary replied. Robert just called. He's on his way. Lucy smiled. She now called him Dad sometimes when it felt right. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on small moments of trust and understanding. Robert arrived carrying a large box wrapped in silver paper. He kissed Mary on the cheek and hugged Lucy. Happy birthday, he said to Mary. And happy Foundation Day to us all. Guests began to arrive. People from the town, families the foundation had helped, and Robert's colleagues who now supported their work. The garden filled with laughter and conversation. When everyone had arrived, Robert stood up to speak. He looked different from the stern businessman Lucy had first met at the Golden Swan. His face was softer. His smile came more easily. "Thank you all for coming today," he began. "We're here to celebrate Mary's birthday, but also to celebrate second chances." He looked at Mary with such love that Lucy felt tears in her eyes. 25 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left Oak Ridge," Robert continued. "I lost the woman I loved and missed the chance to see my daughter grow up." Lucy watched as her mother wiped away a tear. "But life gave us a second chance when Lucy bravely asked me about a photograph in my wallet," Robert said, smiling at his daughter. "And today I want to ask another brave question." Robert walked to Mary and took her hand. Then, to everyone's surprise, he knelt down on one knee. From his pocket, he pulled out a small red box. "Mary Wilson, I've loved you for 25 years. I carried your picture because I could never let you go. Will you marry me and make our family complete?" Mary covered her mouth with her hand. Tears ran down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." The garden erupted in cheers and applause. Robert slipped the ring onto Mary's finger and stood to kiss her. Lucy rushed forward to hug them both. Later, as the sun began to set, Lucy found a quiet moment alone with her parents. They sat together on a bench under the old apple tree. "Are you happy?" Robert asked Lucy, his arm around Mary's shoulders. Lucy looked at them, her mother healthy and glowing, her father finally where he belonged. She thought about the foundation and all the good they were doing. She thought about how much had changed in just 1 year. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm happy." Sometimes life's greatest gifts came from the most unexpected places. A chance question, a photograph in a wallet, a family finding its way back together. The end.